Hello everyone, this is Marcel here. I wanted to talk a bit about mental games and programming and how to beat it. I realize that this video is not all inclusive. It doesn't cover every game out there. There's basically an infinite number of potential things that people could be doing with our minds and trying to influence us, but it covers some of the bigger ones and it shows some potential ways to avoid them or even to use them to your advantage. I also wanted to take a break from the touchy-feely kind of videos and do something a little more in-depth, a little more useful. Okay, let's dive right in. Consider for a moment that the human mind is like a mansion that's being constantly built, rebuilt, and reinforced as we go throughout our daily lives. In order to go from one thought process to another, we have to build pathways, think of them as hallways, to get from one area to the next within the mansion. How we build those hallways and whether or not they go in specific directions has a lot to do with how or where we learn things and what our perception of them is. The better or more efficient a hallway is built, and the more often we use it, the stronger that it becomes. Two separate people could have exactly the same experience and perceive it in different ways and understand it differently because of how their mind is wired or how they make those connections, whether it be intentional or not. Pickup artists, assuming they don't mind me speaking on their behalf, take advantage of this by giving people, primarily women, a completed hallway. They guide a person's mind in the direction they want it to go before putting the room there so that that person that they're speaking to will perceive them in a particular way. In many cases, they tap into a woman's misandry and take advantage of that. Now that we have a bit of an analogy built up, I'm going to metaphorically give you a hammer. Now, you can use it to rebuild, you can use it to deconstruct as a shield, or, if you so choose, even as a weapon. Bear in mind, we are still speaking metaphorically here. I don't condone actual violence or mental abuse. Firstly, let me establish that the means in which a person discovers something is equally important to what it is that they discover. I will give you a few examples. Have many of you heard of the Pavlov's dog experiment? The one where he rings the bells before the dog gets any food, and over time the dog begins to associate the ringing of the bell to getting food. Then when he rings it, the dog salivates in preparation, even if there is no food. It's probably not a surprise that humans do this too. Even some of the romantic dating sites give you suggestions like lighting a scented candle every time before you and your girlfriend or wife want to make love, and then eventually it gets to a point that you can light that candle and she gets in the mood, even if she wouldn't have been previously, because that scent is associated with sex, even though realistically there shouldn't be any connection. Another big one is having people say your name while you're having sex, by the woman or by the man, because if they say a different name more frequently, then they're likely to say that again accidentally because the connections are wired that way. It also coaches them to where if they were with anyone else who also had them say their name, they're likely to say your name accidentally instead, which is pretty much a win-win either way. It's good to ask them to say your name if you're out there having sex. Right in the middle of it, just throw it out there and see what happens, if you're ready for the answer. Humans have the ability to do this programming on their own due to their mind's complexity, without the coaching on the side. The hallway or the connection just has to be built to where when a person has an interaction in the same way, they associate it that way on their own. This ties in a little bit to blue pill males reprogramming themselves to think that what are essentially abusive relationships are healthy or normal. Here's an entertaining example of a one-time interaction that created a pathway that is not easily removed. I learned from Smarter Every Day that there is a way to prevent water from splashing back up on you when you go to the bathroom. He warns you at the beginning of the video that if you watch it, you're going to think of him every single time you go to the bathroom for the rest of your life. And it's true. For a great majority of us, you actually do. The link is in the description for those brave enough to click it. But once you've watched the video, there is no further interactions between you and that person. that video. The external stimulus that causes the synapses to fire, that reminds you of the interaction, is the toilet. It's the activity that you're performing. Another example is when a pickup artist is talking to a woman, and at the end of their discussion, he gives her a sugar packet and tells her to put it in her pocket, just after he gave her his phone number and asked her to think of him. At the end of the day, when she goes home and empties her pockets, she's going to find that sugar packet and be reminded of him and their conversation, and that's usually when a person would consider calling. All that these are is connecting external stimuli to mental pathways. People do this to each other all the time, whether or not it's intentional. Consider for a moment when a guy does something that his girlfriend likes, and she kisses him as a reward, usually just by reflex. And by doing that, she causes a chemical reaction in his brain that releases serotonin, dopamine, as well as tying it into the sexual portions of the brain. So essentially, it's her prompting you to repeat the action in order to get sexual rewards. This is also true when they want something and they make their eyes big and get pouty or act like a little kid, try to appear vulnerable. They're tapping into our instincts to care and nurture and protect. But this is all surface level manipulation. It's progressive, it takes time, and it's something that a person is coached into. It doesn't happen overnight. Men are trained by it over time, despite its genetic connections. I suggest that there is a deeper form of mental control that comes from even a single interaction that can change the way a person will think for the rest of their natural life, and it can be used to the good or bad of a situation, even to remove all of that programming. A good example is when a person finally takes the red pill, and that usually occurs when they get backed into so tight of a corner in a room somewhere in that mansion that they finally start just busting through walls and completely rewire everything in their mind to associate bad things with what they actually should be associated with, as opposed to them going completely over on the other side and being connected to good. Sometimes a lot has to be torn down about the way we think in order to rebuild with a more efficient and effective mind. An example of this being used for bad would be someone cursing another person, not like with vulgarity, but in the sense of, for the rest of your life, you will have bad luck and stuff. Now, I don't believe in that in a literal sense, but in a psychological sense. For some of us to hear that, we will think about it and start to perceive that reality, even though it doesn't actually change anything. Think of it as a poison placebo. It's not real, but the acknowledgement of it and the perception of it gives it reality within the person involved. You really do give these things power by acknowledging them. My own personal experience in that regard came from when I was having the end of a relationship with a girl back when I was younger, and she did some things that truly and deeply hurt me. And at the end of it, I went up to her and I told her, just before kissing her, that every time she kissed another man, she would think of me. It was a dirty trick that I played on her, and she brought it up to me years later, so I know it had the effect I had wanted at the time. Though it seems even our own intellect is not without a sense of karmatic justice, as I cannot use that skill or even kiss sometimes without having her face flash across my mind. Though that kind of action from any of you won't be necessary, and I will tell you why. For those of you that have the misfortune to be manipulated or hurt by anyone, and find yourselves in a circumstance where you feel your world crashing down and everything is collapsing and you don't feel like there's a way out, do not despair. At that moment, you will remember back on this video the things that we discussed about perception. You will realize that there is a good solution to whatever problem you're dealing with. You may just not see it yet. And that whomever is causing you harm, emotional or not, is not in control of your actions. You are. And from that realization, you will be empowered and you will prevail. This has been Marcel. Thank you for your time.